He's not going back to the NCAA next year. It's not happening. Okay, so he's going to sign pro. The question, as I said off the top of the podcast, is which end of 95 is he going to start his pro career at? Providence or Boston?
You're listening to the PuckUps Podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian DeFelice.
Welcome into episode 22 of the PuckUps Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, and thank you all for joining me. On today's show, we're going to talk about the Bruins' huge win over the weekend against the Red Wings in Detroit. And we're also going to weigh in on a conversation that everybody and their mothers seem to be having over the last couple of days. And that, of course, has to do with James Hagens. Now, whether or not the Bruins' top prospect signs a pro contract this spring is less the question. Which end of 95 he starts that pro career at? Well, that's where the debate lies. So we'll get into all of that throughout the course of this episode. But before we do, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcast. And if you want to get in touch with me or be a part of the show, you can email me, info@thepuckups.com. You can tweet at me on X at BrianDFelice_. You can tweet at the show at the PuckUps, or you can comment on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram, anywhere that the show has an account and produces content. Now let's kick things off with what was a massive game on Saturday night in the Motor City. Puck dropped with the Bruins and Red Wings having the same number of games played, identical records, the same number of points, and the same points percentage. Boston owned the tiebreaker, which of course is regulation wins. But needless to say, if the Red Wings found a way to win in regulation or extra time, they would have leapfrogged Boston in the standings. So when you consider Boston's struggles away from TD Garden this season, and you add to that it is essentially a playoff game against the Red Wings in Detroit, you know that Detroit's fan base was going to be up for this game, and that the Red Wings were going to be up for this game, and that it would be a major challenge for Boston to skate away with 2 points. To Boston's credit, now Jeremy Swayman was the story of the game for Boston. He was their best player. He was the number one star of the game. But I do feel like Boston in the first period, and for much of the first 2 periods, I do think they played a really strong road game. I don't think that Detroit took the game to Boston until later on, and certainly in the third period. But I felt like of the 2 teams, if you were to ask me which team started on time, which team started on their toes, which team recognized the gravity of the situation that they were in, and which team played like it really was a playoff game to start, it was Boston. I thought Boston outplayed Detroit, certainly to start that game. Once penalty troubles started to mount for the Bruins, which, surprise, surprise, it's a day that ends in Y for Boston. Then I thought Detroit started to find their legs and find their offensive rhythm. And certainly, as I said a minute ago, in the third period, despite Boston outscoring Detroit in that frame, Detroit really carried play. And that's where Swayman really had to stand on his head. But in the first period, the Bruins, I think it took Detroit at least 10 minutes to register their first shot on goal. Boston had at least a 6-0 shot advantage to begin action. And I as I said, I do think that they were playing on their toes, and they were playing like a team on a mission. So you can look at the box score after 60, and the story is very evident that Detroit outgenerated and outchanced Boston over the course of 60. But if you break the game down into segments and you look at the first period as its own game, the shots were 10-10 after the first period. And as I said, it took Detroit a while, and I think at least a power play or two towards the end of the first period to kind of generate a lot of those shots. But the first period as its own game, I would say was a draw, maybe slight advantage Boston. And then the second period, I think the shots were 11-10 Detroit. And again, that's pretty even. If you're the road team and you're near even in shots, that says that you're actually playing probably a better game to that point. So I think it's fair to argue, and it's subjective, but I do think it's fair to argue that through 40 minutes, the game was at worst for Boston even. Again, when you consider the amount of penalties that they took, not bad through 40. Not bad through 40. Of course, as I said, the third period kind of got away from them in terms of the shot category. Detroit outshot them in the third 23-7. But Boston outscored the Red Wings, I think 3-1 in the third period. So, but let's go back to the beginning and break it down to the best that we can. So the Red Wings get the first goal of the game in the second period. They almost took the lead as time expired in the first period on the power play, but it was it JT Compher? I think it was Compher for the Red Wings. He got a rebound on the power play, and the puck crossed the goal line about a tenth of a second after time expired. And so it was close. It was close, but you can't argue the clock running out there. So that was unfortunate for the Wings. However, they did find a way to get the lead in the second period, as I just alluded to. This was a power play goal by Lucas Raymond. Mason Raymond, Vancouver Canucks legend. Those who saw the 2011 Cup Finals, that was a huge loss for Vancouver when Raymond went down. I want to say that was game 3 or 4 in Boston. Can you guys remind me? But it was in the corner. Weird play. Johnny Boychuk and Raymond going into the corner, and Raymond was kind of bent over, and Boychuk kind of rode him into the boards, and I think he had like a back injury or something. That was a tough loss for Vancouver. Anyway, didn't expect to go down that corner. But anyway, Lucas Raymond for the Wings gives them a 1-0 lead. And this is a Hampus Lindholm. Stop me if you've heard that before. Hampus Lindholm in the box for Boston. And it honestly, guys and gals, it is comical at this point with Hampus Lindholm. It really just feels like every game he takes a penalty. Now, what's even funnier is that, and again, you have to laugh at these things sometimes, it's not just that he takes penalties often, it's when he takes them. They're always so inopportune. It's either putting the Bruins down to a 5-on-3, or it's, at a point in the game where you're starting to give the other team life, or it's after a string of Bruins penalties already and the penalty killers are tired and you get another one. And that's the category that this one falls into. The Bruins had already killed off a couple of penalties, 2 or 3 in the game to this point, and our boy Hampus gets called for a stick infraction, and the Wings take advantage, 1-0. Okay. Fortunately for the Bruins, they were able to get a power play of their own and an extended 5-on-3. Now, while the second penalty was a freak of nature, which was Mo Seider icing the puck from his own end and clearing the glass behind Swayman. Now that is a delay of game penalty well worth it. It kind of reminds me of that scene in Mighty Ducks D2 when that kid takes a run from Iceland at somebody on US and he goes, 2 minutes, well worth it. Like that was a 2-minute delay game, well worth it for Mo Seider. But the reason that the Wings were already on the penalty kill was because David Pastrnak had to lug David Perron up the ice like a sled dog. Perron was hooking him like it was 1985. That was pretty indisputable. Not going to win that foot race against Pastrnak. And Perron, the veteran that he is, he's very slick, very sly at how he goes about his business. I actually like David Perron. I think he was a pretty instrumental player for the 2019 Blues. Sorry to rub salt in the wound for us Bruins fans, but he's just a veteran who kind of gets under your skin, but he also can capitalize on offensive opportunities, and he just knows how to play the games within the game. At this point in his career, he's definitely he's on the whole probably 17 of 18 at this point, maybe even on the 18th fairway. But he took a minor penalty there on Pasternak and put the Wings down a man. And as I said, Mo Seider with the delay of game. Okay, 5-on-3 for Boston. So as we know, the Bruins power play has been, pretty much dog shit since the Olympic break got over. And that extends to their 5-on-3s. They've had multiple 5-on-3 opportunities since the Olympic break concluded. And even then, they've had trouble generating. This power play started off on the wrong foot. You lose a faceoff and Detroit ices it. And I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go again. But fortunately for the Bruins, they do quickly regain zone entry, again, which you should on a 5-on-3. There shouldn't be much issues with zone entries on a 5-on-3. And they work it around the umbrella up top a little bit. And Pasternak, McAvoy, Geeky take turns playing catch. And McAvoy finds Pasternak for what is a signature of David's, which is the Alex Ovechkin-esque one-timer on the power play. And this one, he made no mistake. It was a back scratcher. It was off his stick and out of the net before you could even say wow. And, David's goal scoring has been down this year. We all know that. His playmaking has not wavered at all. He was able to get his 58th assist on the season later on in the game on a Marat Husnadinov empty net goal. 500th assist of David Pasternak's career, by the way. But the power play goal he scored in the first or the second period, he hasn't had a power play goal in, I want to say, a couple of months, maybe dating back to January. And just generally speaking, I don't know what that power play goal looked like because it was a couple months back. But he hasn't had a lot of his signature Alex Ovechkin, Steven Stamkos-esque power play goals this year. I'm sure he's had maybe a couple, but not as many as he usually does. So it's a long-winded way of me saying, hopefully, getting this goal, his first power play goal in a couple of months, and in vintage David Pasternak fashion, hopefully this is a sign of things to come for him. Hopefully the goal scoring touch, which, by the way, the goal scoring has started to pick up for him. I know he's always been a goal scorer, but as I said earlier, for his standards, his goal scoring has been down a bit this year. So over the last 5-6 games, you're really starting to see him pick it back up with the goal scoring. And that's great for Boston, who not only need him to score down the stretch and hopefully into the playoffs, but a player like that, when he feels like things are going his way, he's pretty much unstoppable. When the best players in the world are fighting it, they still find ways to produce, which we've talked about in recent episodes. He was kind of fighting it a little bit after the Olympic break, but he was still finding ways to contribute offensively. So the best players in the world, even when they're struggling for their standards, they're still contributing. But when they're feeling good, that's when you really have to look out, because that's when they can turn a 1 or 2 point night into a 3-4 point night. Anyway, a big goal for Boston. It was big for the power play. It was big for David's confidence and big for the team, 1-1. The score would stay 1-1 until early in the third period when Alex DeBrincat, who is Detroit's top goal scorer this year, he found a way to get a seeing eye wrist shot through a charging Mark Kastelik's legs and went in over Swayman's glove. And if you look at the replay or just in real time, but you can see Swayman wasn't too happy with Mark Kastelik there. And because I think that he essentially feels like Kastelik took his eyes away, even though Kastelik was charging DeBrincat nearly at Detroit's offensive blue line. So it's not like it was a direct screen, right? It's not like Swayman had to move side to side to look around Kastelik. But I think the play and the puck it came from far enough out that Kastelik's body just blocked. I mean, if you think about it from Swayman's perspective, so Swayman's in goal. Pretend you're Swayman, right? And you're pretend you're in the Bruins crease and you're looking out about 25, 30 feet to the offensive blue line. Think about the size difference between Mark Kastelik and Alex DeBrincat. If you actually think about it and you put yourself in Swayman's skates, he probably couldn't even see DeBrincat's body at all because Kastelik probably has, 7 inches on him and he's way thicker too. So the fact that he probably couldn't see DeBrincat's body, which means he couldn't see when he released the puck, and the fact that the puck somehow, some way got through Kastelik's legs, he probably didn't pick that puck up until it was too late. And so I imagine he's probably saying to Kastelik something along the lines of either block it or get out of the way so I can see it. And Mark's intentions were right. He, DeBrincat just has that level of talent where he found a way to find a window and get the puck through. So anyway, 2-1 Red Wings. And you're not feeling great about that. The Bruins, again, their depth scoring has been, especially at 5-on-5, right? I mean, the Pasternak line, you like that line. You really like the second line. The Reichel, Geekie, and Elias Lindholm line, you liked them in their first game together, but it's such a small Costco sample. You don't really know if you can rely on that. And then the fourth line is not really a line that you count on to generate many goals. So when you consider the fact that Boston hasn't been the best road team, Detroit's kind of been buzzing a little bit the second half of the game. You got the Red Wings crowd feeling pretty good. They're all singing the Eminem song after DeBrincat's goal. Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na. That's a great song, actually. Very catchy. Pretty good goal song, I'm not going to lie. Anyway, it is the unsuspecting hero of Elias Lindholm who gets the Bruins back on the board, ties the game 2-2 in the third period. This was a play, pretty innocent-looking play. Detroit had possession beneath their goal line. They went high off the glass to get it out. Mason Lohrei stays strong at the right point for Boston, somehow keeps it in, battles with Detroit's winger to keep that puck in, and it finds Morgan Geekie on the boards. Geekie sees Elias Lindholm across the offensive zone, finds a diagonal seam pass to him, and Lindholm, with a bit of a hesitation move, and he kind of goes on the ice, 5-hole on John Gibson. We'll get to Gibson in short order, but I mentioned last episode that even though Morgan Geekie assisted on a Jonathan Aspero goal against Winnipeg that made it 6-1 in the dying minutes of the game, even though that the goal was pretty much meaningless in the grand scheme of the game, for a guy in Morgan Geekie who has been struggling to produce any type of offense since the Olympic break, especially at 5-on-5, just being able to know that you got a primary assist at 5-on-5, I said on the last episode, I bet that'll go a long way for his psychology. Because especially for somebody who's supposed to be a scorer, and I know that Morgan's more of a finisher than he is a playmaker. We all know that. But you'll take what you can get. Oh, I got a primary assist, even though it was just a simple handoff at the top of the circle to make it 6-1. You'll take it. You'll take it and you'll run to the bank. And sure as shit, he ends up getting 3 assists against the Red Wings. So now, in Morgan's last 2 games, he has 4 assists, and 3 of them being primary assists, and 2 of them being huge primary assists because he wasn't done against the Red Wings with getting a primary assist. We'll get to that one in just a second. But Elias Lindholm, another guy, I mean, that was his first goal with a goalie in the net, I want to say since January 26th. Now, you have to be careful with the since this, since then with players this season because, you could sit there and say, oh, he hasn't scored a goal in 2.5 months, right? But it's not really entirely fair because, the NHL had nearly a full month off of the Olympic break. But it's been a while. It's been a while since he's scored with a goalie in the net. And I have been very, very vocal and very critical of Elias Lindholm. I have talked about him not being good enough in the production category, not being good enough in the generation category. I have been consistent with giving him his credit for his face-off play. I've never once said Elias Lindholm doesn't have a great face-off percentage. And I have never once said he's a bad defensive player. I've been pretty consistent saying, listen, he can take face-offs for you. He's reliable defensively, but that's just not enough. That's not enough. That's enough for Sean Corrali, right? That's enough for a fourth line center. Hey, win your fair share of face-offs, be over 50% in the face-off circle, and be physical and be good defensively, be a spark plug and chip in offense when you can. That's a great parameter to set for a fourth line center, but not for a guy who is supposed to be your top center right now, and certainly one of your top two centers. Supposed to be. Right now, you have Fraser Minton playing with Pasternak, and you have Zacha doing his thing on the second line. So right now, Elias is, let's call it for what it is. He's your third line center right now. Okay, now I know the Bruins don't really have their lines are difficult to really cast right now because Fraser Minton and Marat Husnudinov, they're not first line players. They're not bona fide first line players right now at this point in their career. However, if you're on a line with David Pasternak, you're not going to be a third liner on a depth chart. You're the top line, right? Any line if you have two cones with David Pasternak, those cones are first liners for the time being. That's just the way that it goes, right? So anyway, it's a huge goal for Elias Lindholm. It's a huge goal. It's his first goal in a couple of months, as I said, and I've been critical of him when he hasn't been good enough. I'm going to be complimentary when he is. And I even said last episode, I said I liked how Reichel and Geekie and Lindholm looked. They were on the ice for Reichel's goal, which again, it was a bit of a fluke goal, right? Because it's a dump in off the glass, hits a stanchion, and Reichel wins a race to a loose puck. And then the Aspero goal was in garbage time. But again, they're on the ice. They generated, they scored. Don't take it away from them. So I liked them against Winnipeg. And I liked them against Detroit. So I said I liked them against Winnipeg. I said Lucas Reichel is he for some reason he's that magic potion that's been able to kind of rejuvenate Lindholm and Geekie right now. For whatever reason, they're working. I know Reichel's speed and skill kind of forces them along. I mean, David Pasternak has speed and skill, right? And those guys were still struggling. But sometimes, I don't know, sometimes it's really inexplainable how certain combinations work. Look at Zacha, Mittelstadt, and Arvidsson. They've been one of the best lines in hockey this year. Nobody saw that trio being this. I certainly did not. But if Elias Lindholm and Morgan Geekie can get themselves going here down the stretch, the Bruins desperately need that. If they want to make the playoffs and make any type of noise, those guys have to be producing at a respectable clip. You cannot be invisible offensively. And to their credit, they have not been the last two games. So I'm not going to sit here and shit on them now that they're producing. I mean, you have to give them their flowers, and I'm doing that. Like, if players aren't producing, I don't solely criticize them if they're simply just not producing. If the effort's there, if the generation is there, if the chances are there, then you're not going to hear me say, oh, these guys are terrible, they suck, they can't play. No. If you're generating and you're creating, but you're not executing, I will sit there and say they're trying, they're right around it, they're doing their best. They're just snake bitten right now. Their execution's not where it needs to be, and that's fair. But I don't think it was a matter of their execution wasn't where it needed to be. I don't think Lindholm and Geekie's problems were just that they couldn't finish. It's that they weren't generating. They weren't affecting the game as much as they were capable of. Now, somebody commented on my last video that Geeky and Lindholm their struggles were not created equal, because Lindholm does take faceoffs and he is good defensively, and that Geeky wasn't doing those things. And I think that's fair. That is fair. But still, they had to do better, and now they are. So we'll give them credit for it. We'll get to it in the next part of this show, but the Reichel experiment, I do think, is kind of playing an impact in the great debate that people are having around Bruins Twitter right now that we'll get to in short order. So Lindholm ties the game, and then Morgan Geeky finds a streaking Nikita Zadorov, and Zadorov enters Detroit's end in transition and just puts a wrist shot past John Gibson. Now, let's get to Gibson for a second, because as much as Jeremy Swayman was fantastic for Boston, John Gibson on certain plays was equally bad for Detroit. I am thrilled for Elias Lindholm that he was able to get off the schneid and find himself a goal, because it was a big goal for the Bruins. Big goal for the Bruins in a huge game. Arguably their biggest game of the year to that point. But that goal should not have gone in, that Lindholm scored. It's a shot on the ice. Listen, I'll give Elias Lindholm credit. It was a bit deceiving. He did try to do that. Okay? It's just that Gibson, it's just not a goal you can let in there. Same with the Zadorov goal. You have to give Zadorov credit for getting the shot off and not having it blocked. Put pucks to the net and good things happen. Don't ever apologize for putting a shot on net. But Gibson letting that puck go through his arm, it just can't happen. Now, I believe on the broadcast they said that Gibson was in the middle of his 8th consecutive start. So I think maybe fatigue and Detroit relying a little bit too much on Gibson, maybe it's catching up to him. But if you're a Bruins fan, if you're a Bruins player, if you're a Bruins coach, we'll take it and we'll run. Okay, so the Bruins take a 3-2 lead. And again, Swayman stays really strong down the stretch, makes a lot of grade A saves. And then it's David Pastrnak with the goalie pulled. Elias Lindholm helps win a faceoff, so he gets credit for a secondary assist. So Elias Lindholm finishes the game with a goal and an assist. And Pastrnak gets the puck just outside of Detroit's offensive blue line. Fakes like he's going to go for the empty net shot from about whatever it is, 150 feet. And he gets Seider and Patrick Kane to bite, and he feathers it across the neutral zone to Marat Husnudinov. Kuzi gets his 14th goal of the year, ices the game for the Bruins 4-2. Jeremy Swayman gets his 28th win of the season. That's a career high in wins for Jeremy Swayman. So it was a big win for the Bruins, a big 4-point swing for Boston. Okay, so you enter the action tied with Detroit. You leave with another regulation win, which again, that's why you had the tiebreaker on Detroit entering the game. So you've added a regulation win that Detroit does not have. You gain 2 points on them. And as things stand right now, which is Monday at 4:30, Montreal is 3rd place in the Atlantic Division with 86 points in 69 games. Boston is wild card 1 with 86 points in 70 games. So the Bruins are tied with the Canadiens for points. The Habs do have 1 game in hand, of course, as I just mentioned. So it's not just the wild card that the Bruins could finish off here in. They could creep up into the top 3 in Atlantic. Now, if they do, they might be creating themselves a first-round date with the Tampa Bay Lightning, as opposed to a first-round matchup with either Buffalo or Carolina, which I would take my chances against one of those teams over Tampa. But wild card 2 actually is right now it goes to the Islanders. The Islanders are tied with the Blue Jackets. The Blue Jackets are 3rd in the Metro, and the Islanders are wild card 2. So Columbus and New York both have 85 points. 1 game in hand for Columbus, and Detroit right now with 84 points in 70 games, they are on the outside looking in. The Senators are still in the mix. They're 5 points back of Boston right now, so I don't really think that the Bruins are in direct jeopardy from Ottawa. But right now, Detroit is the odd man out, and had they beat the Bruins on Saturday, that wouldn't be the case. So big win for Boston. It was a playoff game. It was an unofficial playoff game, we'll call it, and they found a way to get the job done. Let's go to Elias Lindholm after the game, talking about his first goal in quite a bit and a big win for Boston.
That goal feel?
No, it's always fun to score. Obviously, it was a little uncertain whether it was offside or not, so it's tough to, sally or be happy about it before it was confirmed. But no, it was good. It was an important goal for us, and it was unbelievable to get the 2 points.
It seemed like it took maybe a half a step back instead of one time, and it was that kind of strategy, or?
Yeah, it was not really flat, so it was hard to one-time it. So I just decided to, catch it and then shoot. So yeah.
Yeah, there you go, Elias. Pass, shoot, score, right? So again, big win for Boston, and what was encouraging was which players helped get them to the win. It was a game that had Boston's top players all over the score sheet, right? Jeremy Swayman was their top player, number one star in the game. Okay, he was nails. David Pastrnak had a goal and an assist. Elias Lindholm, goal, assist. Morgan Geekie, 3 assists. Charlie McAvoy, 2 assists. Okay, so the Bruins' top players, or the guys who are paid to be the Bruins' top players, they stepped up. Now, you may realize that the second line was a little bit quiet on the score sheet. That's okay. Let's give them that grace, because you know what? First of all, they weren't bad at all, but they've been carrying this Bruins team a lot, and they deserved finally for their teammates to kind of step up and take the reins. So right now, the Bruins kind of have a good thing going, right? The kid line that David Pastrnak coined earlier in the year, with him, who's a relatively, we'll call him a younger veteran, right? I mean, Pastrnak is what, 29? So, he's not a kid himself. That's kind of the humor behind the line's name. But Minton at 21 and Husdinov at 23 certainly are kids in their own rights. They've been really good. I mentioned last episode, their goals for per 60, their goals against per 60 are at the top of the list among Bruins line combinations who qualify with that time on ice. The second line has been great all year. The fourth line has their identity with Corrali, Kaslik, and Jeannot. Tanner Jeannot, by the way, was wearing a red no-contact jersey in practice today, so he might be dealing with something. And Mikey Eyssimont was slotted in on the fourth line in practice. So if Tanner Jeannot isn't good to go against the Leafs on Tuesday, expect Mikey Eyssimont to maybe get a chance on that fourth line. Okay, but either way, that fourth line, when healthy, you know who they are. And again, the third line right now of Elias Lindholm, Morgan Geekie, and Lucas Reichel, they've been good in their last couple of games since being put together. They have, 3 goals for as a line at 5-on-5, 0 against. And again, it's not just the points. Like, they look decent. They look pretty good. Okay, so right now the Bruins lines, they're looking good right now. And that kind of leads us in to our next conversation, which is James Hagens. Now, Boston College lost in the Hockey East semifinals to UConn in overtime on Friday night. They did not qualify for the national NCAA tournament. So what that means is that essentially the second that BC lost, James Hagens, became available for the Bruins to sign. Now, I and pretty much everybody else expect James Hagens to sign a pro contract this week. And right now, I'm sure news is going to drop while I'm recording or shortly after I record that the Bruins have signed him to a contract or to a pro contract. And, whether that's in Providence or Boston, but he's going to sign a pro contract this spring. He's not going to go back to BC for a junior year. I don't see that at all. He had 1.38 points per game this year in college hockey. He's a top prospect. He's not going back to the NCAA next year. It's not happening. Okay. So he's going to sign pro. The question, as I said off the top of the podcast, is which end of 95 is he going to start his pro career at? Providence or Boston? Now, please feel free to comment below about what you think the Bruins should do with him. Okay. Do you care that much? Personally, I really don't think it's that big a deal either way, because I do think that Hagens is going to play for the Bruins at some point this season, somehow, some way. Whether he starts in Providence for a couple of games and gets called up, whether he starts in Providence and he plays well and somebody in Boston gets hurt, or somebody in Boston is not performing well enough, or if he just starts in Boston right away. I don't think Hagens' first game with the Bruins is going to be opening night next season. I think he'll be in the opening night lineup next season, but I don't think it'll be his first game with Boston. I do think he'll play for the Bruins at some point this spring. So it doesn't look like it's going to be Tuesday night against the Leafs. I guess anything can happen, but based off of the information we have at the time of my recording right now, it doesn't seem that's going to be the case. But we'll get into it, because obviously there's been a lot of polarizing opinions about this topic. And I understand all ends of it. I do. But let's just set the table here and hear from Elliotte Friedman on Monday morning's 32 Thoughts podcast about the Bruins and their handling of the James Hagens situation.
I've gotten a few notes from people asking, what's going on with James Hagens. Bruins first rounder, their season ended. He can join the NHL team. They have his draft rights for a few more years. I think Monday we'll get a clearer indication of where this is going to go. First of all, I don't think the Bruins have any doubt about his ability long term, and I don't think that anybody doubts that James Hagens is anything but a great fit for them and a great player to have as part of their prospect pool and the future of the Bruins. I just know that some teams get really nervous about this in the middle of a playoff race. I just know some NHL teams, they do get goofy about that. Like bringing somebody in at this point in time, if you're not 100% sure that they can help you. I think we'll get, I have no doubt that long-term the Bruins believe that this is the right player for them and they're ecstatic to have him. I just know how teams sometimes feel about doing this right now.
All right, so there's a lot to talk about here. Let's start off with this. It's my personal opinion, okay? So, feel free to agree with me or not on this, but I think that if Morgan Geekie and Elias Lindholm were still scoreless at 5-on-5, and they were still stuck in the mud, and they were still playing with Mikey Eyssimont and or Alex Steeves, I don't really think there's much of a debate about what the Bruins do with James Hagens. I think he would already be signed by now. And I think they would be looking at him to try to catapult a Bruins lineup into the playoffs. However, in the last week, they have called up Lucas Reichel on an emergency basis. Now, there's some gamesmanship there. Make no mistake about it. Alex Steeves and Mikey Eyssimont all of a sudden have injuries that nobody's heard about or talked about. They have a couple of bruises. They can't go. No. You're only allowed a handful or so of regular call-ups after the trade deadline. And I think if we're being honest here, I think the Bruins, kind of maybe circumvented some gamesmanship there to call up Lucas on an emergency basis while not having to do something with Steves or AC from a personnel perspective. So either way, they call up Lucas Reichel. Lucas Reichel is 23 years old. Okay, he's 23 years old, 17th overall pick in 2020 by the Blackhawks. He has youth. He has NHL experience. He now has, I want to say, 190 games played at the NHL level after Detroit. He has a couple of points in his last couple of games as a Bruin. He has a ton of speed. He has a lot of skill, great hands. He did not pan out in Chicago or Vancouver because he doesn't have the skill to excel at the NHL level. He didn't work out in Chicago or Vancouver for reasons that I really don't have or know because I'm not in those markets. But I'm sure it was a combination of the player maybe being, a little bit immature on or off the ice or both. And that's common, right? These kids that get drafted, they're still so young. Maybe the organizations in Vancouver and Chicago weren't utilizing him properly. They weren't optimizing his skill set, whether it be a position that he played or how they were using him in a certain system. I don't really know. But Lucas Reichel has not been up and down from the minors and the NHL because he doesn't possess the raw skill and ability to be an NHL effective player. He has the raw talent. It's a matter of putting it all together. And that's what the Bruins are trying to do right now with Reichel. That being said, for whatever reason, and it's speed, it's skill that he has, he's forcing Geekie and Lindholm to get outside their comfort zone and play with a winger who has that straight ahead speed and skill. And I also think Geekie and Lindholm know that the rubber has met the road and they have to put up or shut up at this point, and they really got to start being the leaders on this team that they're paid to be and expected to be. So it was a combination of things, but the reality is Lucas Reichel has started to get Morgan Geekie and Elias Lindholm out of their funk, not just from a production standpoint, but from a generation standpoint. They are making things happen. They're looking a bit quicker. They're looking, all of a sudden, they're starting to look like players that can make plays when for a month the puck was dying on their sticks. And I think the Bruins right now, being in the ever tight playoff race that they're in, where every damn point matters, I think they're looking at it and they're saying, it's not that we don't think James Hagens could come in here and help us right now, but for whatever reason, Geekie and Lindholm were struggling with Pasternak. Geekie and Lindholm were struggling with Steves and Acimont. Now, don't get me wrong. The latter two names I just mentioned are not in the same galaxy as David Pasternak. But the point is, the Bruins have been trying Lindholm and Geekie with multiple different line mates of different skill sets, and nothing has been working for them. And all of a sudden, Lucas Reichel, the Bruins trade a 6th-rounder for him. He puts up some points in Providence. They call him up. And for whatever reason, all of a sudden, you put him with Geekie and Lindholm, and now they're starting to look good. And I think the Bruins are thinking to themselves right now, Morgan Geekie and Elias Lindholm, they're too important. They're too important to our down the stretch games to make the playoffs, that if Lucas Reichel is the guy that's getting them going right now, then we don't really want to do much to tinker with that, because their games, and by there, I mean Geekie and Lindholm, the state of their games are so vulnerable right now that the Bruins are probably saying, all right, like, this is working. Let's just go with it for a second. And you know what? At the same time, in the meantime, if that means that we put James in Providence for a couple of games, just while we figure out and ride this wave, then we'll just do it. Like, it's not going to kill James to go down and get some games in Providence. And let's just try to get the most juice out of the squeeze with Reichel and Geekie and Lindholm until it doesn't work. And I'm not saying that I agree 100% that that's what they should be doing and that is what they're doing. I've seen too many episodes of Behind the B to know how this Bruins team thinks. And I do think that if Lindholm and Geekie were still playing with Asimont or Steves, then I think Hagens would be in the Lucas Reichel role right now. But like I said last episode, I kind of have a difficult time right now seeing Reichel and Hagens in the same lineup because you're not touching the kid line. You're not touching the second line. Hagens is not playing on the fourth line, nor is Reichel, because you're just wasting their skill and speed on that in that type of environment. And it comes down to the third line. And are the Bruins really going to scratch Elias Lindholm or Morgan Geekie? I know there's plenty of Bruins fans out there who have been watching those two guys the last month or so and would say, yeah, absolutely, scratch Lindholm. They're not going to do it. They're just not going to scratch Lindholm. They're not going to scratch Geekie. So it comes down to putting in Hagens over Reichel. And don't get me wrong, this is not a conversation about long-term between Hagens versus Reichel. Long-term, if the Bruins have to choose between James Hagens and Lucas Reichel, they're picking James Hagens. They're picking James Hagens. This is not an indictment on how they view Hagens long-term. I just think they're trying to not rock the boat right now. Now, there are Bruins fans out there, and I get it, who would say, if Reichel can do it with those two, so can Hagens. I'm not saying you're wrong. Hagens very well could. I think Hagens is NHL ready. I think he steps into this Bruins lineup right now, and I think he makes a positive impact in terms of offensive generation. And I don't think putting James Hagens in the Bruins lineup right now would cost him a playoff spot. I don't at all. I just think the Bruins are looking at it and saying, we're seeing Reichel help ignite Lindholm and Geekie right now. We don't want to we don't want to mess that up. If he's helping them, if he's their antidote, then let's just stick with it for a second. As far as what's best for Hagens, I don't think that Hagens going down to Providence for a couple of games is that beneficial to his career. And I don't think him going to the NHL right now is that detrimental to his career. If we're talking a couple games either way, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think it's like, oh, Hagens has to go down to Providence for 3 games and that's gonna really blossom his development for the rest of it. No, it doesn't. He's NHL ready. You know, does NHL ready mean that he will never make mistakes? No. Every single player makes mistakes every single night in the NHL. They're all NHL ready, right? So I'm not saying Hagens is a finished product. There's a difference between a finished product and NHL ready. You can be NHL ready, but not be a finished product yet in terms of, you know, your ultimate player profile. I do think Hagens is ready to go to the NHL and make mistakes, but I think he's both. He's raw. He's not a finished product, but can he play in the NHL right now? Yeah. Will he be as good at the NHL level right now as he will be in a year, 2 years, 3 years? No. He's obviously going to get better with each year, but he could step into an NHL rink right now and play. Absolutely. No doubt. So I just think the Bruins are trying to, you know, take it day by day. And listen, if you're James Hagens and, you know, you think that you can help the Bruins right now, and the Bruins are saying, James, listen, we have a good thing going right now. Like, we want you to go into Providence for a few games. It probably is hard to be in James Hagens' shoes and not somehow take that the wrong way. Because if you're Hagens, look at this through his lens, right? Pretend that you're not a fan or an analyst or whomever that you're watching or listening to this episode. Put yourself in Hagens' shoes. If you were in Hagens' shoes and you heard Don Sweeney say to you on the phone, hey, look, James, you had a great year at BC. We think the world of you, and you're going to be a big part of our team. But, right now, we're going to go with what we have right now for a couple games. And the same time, you can go down to Providence and work at some things. And wouldn't you be James and say, so what, you don't think I can help you right now? Like, that's the natural thought is you don't think I can help you right now because I can. Right. So I do think it's probably a bit of a shot to the ego to hear something like that. I obviously don't know what these conversations sound like. I'm just spitballing. But and again, we'll see. Maybe the Bruins sign him upon me releasing this episode, and I have to do a new one. But yeah, it just feels like the Bruins are just taking it one day at a time right now, and they don't think that it's going to be the worst thing in the world for James to go down to Providence for a couple of games and get his feet wet at the pro level and then call him up. What would I do? Listen, I think I would just start him in Boston for a couple of games. I mean, they're playing Toronto on Tuesday. Toronto sucks this year. I think that's a pretty fair game to give him a first look at the NHL level without, being too fearful of the opponent. Do I think the Bruins are overthinking it a little bit right now? Yes. Yes, I do. How about you? Right? Like, do you think the Bruins are overthinking putting a talent like Hagens and a prospect like Hagens in the NHL right away? Are they overthinking things? Are they overthinking, well, hey, Geeky and Lindholm are finally going? Are they overthinking, man, we just want the most, risk-free lineup right now to try to make the playoffs, and we don't really, are they overthinking these things, right? Would James Hagens going into the lineup really be some sort of playoff detriment, some sort of playoff deterrent for the Bruins? I don't think so. Lucas Reichel is not the most defensively reliable player at this point in his career, right? I mean, I don't know. I do think there's a slight element of overthinking things. I also think there's a bit of stubbornness too. I'm not saying that stubbornness isn't, the right way to go about things, but the Bruins, they historically, James Hagens is not the first high-end Bruins prospect to play in Providence before the NHL. David Pastrnak, he played 25 some odd games in Providence his rookie year. Now, to be fair, David was drafted 23rd overall in his draft year, and nobody knew that David Pastrnak was going to end up becoming David Pastrnak, right? If that draft class was redrafted, Pastrnak would have gone second overall behind Leon Draisaitl. Okay. So, at the time, nobody knew what he was going to become. He was just a undersized finesse, European forward who went 23rd overall. Charlie McAvoy went 14th overall. Okay. Now he started in Providence for a couple of games too after BU's season ended that year. But don't forget that season, the Bruins went into that first round matchup against Ottawa, down Brandon Carlo, who I'm pretty sure he got a concussion in the last game of the year. Kevin Miller was out. Torrey Krug was out. Pretty sure Adam McQuaid was out too. And then Colin Miller got hurt in game 1 against Ottawa. So the Bruins called Charlie McAvoy up from Providence because they literally didn't have enough bodies to start their first round series against Ottawa. Had they had health in the blue line, I don't think Charlie would have been in that series when he was. Okay. Now, Tyler Sagan's another example of somebody, though, who did not start in Providence, but Sagan was obviously a second overall pick, and that whole summer was Tyler versus Taylor Hall, and a bit of a different situation. Okay. But for the most part, the Bruins, obviously Hagens is the highest prospect Boston has had since McAvoy. So there is something to that, but the Bruins they aren't really known around the league as a team that, has prospects play their first game, first pro game in Boston. It's not really how they roll. Now, should they make an exception and get off on the right foot politically and relationship-wise with somebody of Hagens' caliber? I think there's something to be said about that. But again, I just think these things find a way to work themselves out. And whether it's right away or in a couple of weeks or not even, I think Hagens does wear the spoke to be at some point this spring. So I know it's fun to talk about, should he be in Boston right now? And I get it. But we're going to look back at this story in time and say, remember when we were all talking about Hagens starting in Boston versus Providence? No one's going to remember Hagens played in Providence when it's all said and done, right? Even if, especially if it's a couple of games. Now, if Hagens is in Providence for the rest of the spring and he starts the regular season in Providence next year, oh boy, we will be having a much different conversation here on the PuckUps podcast, because I will be, that won't be good. Okay, James Hagens. If James Hagens isn't playing in the Bruins lineup at the absolute latest by opening night next season, there's going to be a fucking problem. Okay, and that's where you might start getting to Cutter Gauthier territory of a prospect who does not like how they're being handled, a high-end prospect, and they're gonna, and you might get into some dangerous waters there politically with the player that's not happy with the organization who drafted him. But that's not the situation right now, and I can almost guarantee you that's not going to be the situation ever. James Hagens will play for the Bruins, and I think he'll play for them at some point this year. When exactly that happens, I don't know just yet. But again, the other thing Elliott said in that sound clip is we'll get more clarity on Monday. It's 4:58, and I've waited as long as I possibly could today to get this episode out there, because I wanted to see if news would break at some point this afternoon to go off of with some updated information, but no further clarity other than he hasn't signed yet. So again, clearly Sweeney and Hagens representatives are trying to figure out how to go about this, and I'm curious to see how it'll play out. Scott McLaughlin, one of my co-hosts on WEEI's The Skate Podcast, was at practice today and asked Marco Sturm afterwards about the concept of a player like James Hagens coming right from college into a playoff race with an NHL program, and what that could look like, and if that's something that is feasible. And Marco Sturm gave a pretty insightful answer, and I found it interesting. So let's go to Marco Sturm after practice today.
Marco, I know you talked about on Saturday, said, James Hagens obviously isn't here yet. In general, what are your thoughts on adding guys down the stretch like this, whether it's from college or a free agent or whatever, as you're trying to make a playoff push?
Yeah, no, it's always a challenge for everyone. Depends a little bit too what kind of phase you're in. So it's the good thing is with me, I over the past, especially in Ontario, I always had college kids coming in. Maybe not Hagens, quality, but they're all college kids. End of the day, they never played against men, so it's always a challenge. And but I'm prepared. Any event, or if not, I don't see a problem, because guys are. I feel like in the league in general, it's part of the game now. If you look at some other teams, there's so many guys now, and it's almost like it's part of the game now, having this time of year college kids coming in.
That was a pretty honest answer by Sturm, and didn't sound to me like a coach who was completely dismissive or scoffing at the idea of somebody in Hagens' position and skill set joining his team as soon as, next game or the game after. That he wasn't saying that he's expecting him to be there. He wasn't saying that he shouldn't be there or anything like that. I mean, I'm sure that there could be some coaches that answer that question along the lines of, that's not my call. That's a GM decision. I don't know. Next question, right? Sturm gave an answer. He gave an answer, and to me, it sounds like he's prepared. He's prepared for James Hagens to be in the Bruins lineup as soon as possible. He's also prepared if Hagens is not. But hey, listen, I guess that if you're in the pro Hagens play for Bruins right now camp, it's encouraging to know that the coach doesn't think it's ridiculous that he could be playing. He did mention it's a challenge. It's a challenge for players out of college, and a lot of Sturm's experience with college players coming to play pro is in the AHL, right, where Sturm was coaching San Antonio, right? Is that where the Kings? No, Ontario Reign. The Ontario Reign. That's where Marco Sturm was coaching for the Kings minor league team prior to coming to Boston. So, yeah, it's an adjustment, but everybody knows that. I mean, listen, even if Hagens were going to Providence, there's an adjustment. It's still the next level. It's still a pro. It's still the pros. NCAA isn't pros. I think the NCAA, more so than the CHL, is the best, most professional style of play amateur league that there is out there to prepare you for pro hockey. Now, I think the skill level of the NCAA is vastly improving now. With just with each generation, kids get better and faster and more skilled, but also with the integration of people from the CHL coming over as well, you have a lot of the skill of the CHL, but you also have the maturity of some pro hockey leagues where you have some players at the NCAA that are 22, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 years old. So NCAA to me is the perfect blend of speed, skill, and experience to prepare players for pro hockey, whether that's the AHL or, of course, the NHL. So I'm not surprised that Sturm says, yeah, it's a challenge for kids. He did mention that James is kind of a different breed of prospect than most kids coming out of college, and we all agree with that and acknowledge that. But I'm not sure exactly where Hagen starts, Providence or Boston. But organizationally, I think that the Bruins know how good of a player he is and that it's a matter of time he'll be playing for them. I just think for some reason the Bruins are being very cautious about how they want to go about this. I don't know if they're overthinking the ELC part of it, when they want his ELC to start this year or next. I don't know if they're overthinking what gives them the best chance to make the playoffs right now at the NHL level. And again, if that means that, it's without Hagens, if you're Hagens, how do you not take that a little personal? But we'll see how it all plays out. And at this point right now, it's 5:00 on Friday. 5:00 on Monday, and still no update from the Bruins. So we'll see. We'll track that. I'm sure it's coming sooner than later. But speaking of sooner or later, let's talk about the Bruins road ahead real quick. As I mentioned, they played the Maple Leafs on Tuesday. They travel to Buffalo to play the Atlantic Division leading Sabres on Wednesday in the second of a back-to-back. And then you have Minnesota at home on Saturday, and then you're in Columbus on Sunday. That's a huge game against the Jackets, a huge game. And then you face Dallas at home on Tuesday. So this next week here, you have Toronto, who you should beat on Tuesday, and then you got a bit of a gauntlet. You have to go to Buffalo, who, again, Buffalo, they're a decade plus since making the playoffs. They're going to make the playoffs this year. So it's not like there's some perennial powerhouse. Like, they still have to learn how to win, in the spring, but they're absolutely a formidable opponent right here and right now for Boston, especially in Buffalo, where that crowd is just in a frenzy of late, as they should be. And then you get to host the Wild on Saturday. Now, Minnesota, they've been a little Jekyll and Hyde lately, but they are still phenomenal. A lot of talent this year. And then you have to play Columbus in Columbus. Another playoff-style game on the road for Boston. CBJ has been very, very good since their coaching change. And then you have Dallas on Tuesday. Dallas is a powerhouse too. So the Bruins, this is a gauntlet here. They have to bear down, and they have to get points against Toronto. You have to do it because it's going to be a lot tougher to get points against Buffalo, Minnesota, Columbus, and Dallas in their ensuing 4 games, okay? So the road ahead for Boston, it's going to put some hair in their chest. The Bruins have been playing playoff hockey for a while now, and I think that'll bode well for them once they make the playoffs. If they make the playoffs, that they've been playing meaningful hockey for quite some time, but they have to get there. They have to get to the playoffs, and they have to take care of business. You're not going to win all these games, I don't think, okay? But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of your next 5 games over the next week, okay? You got 10 points up for grabs. Can you grab 7 of them, 6 of them? All right, you're going to have to do something like that at bare minimum, okay? Well, that'll do it for this episode. We will keep our eye on the weathered horizon for some James Hagens news. I think this week I will be posting another episode depending on what happens. We'll follow the Hagens story, okay? If he doesn't sign, then perhaps we'll record Thursday or Friday after Boston's back-to-back, maybe Thursday. If he does sign, maybe we'll do something quick. I don't know. We'll have to play it by ear. But either way, thank you all very much for listening. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.